So last night, Fox News commentator Tucker Carlson, I guess here, questioned the masculinity of MSNBC broadcaster Chris Hayes. And now, of course, everyone's losing it. There's a bunch of news articles about this saying that, quote, with the headline here, Tucker Carlson says Chris Hayes is what every man would be if feminists had absolute power. Vogue released a special article saying, with the headline, we would swipe right on Chris Hayes, which I absolutely don't believe. We'll break this down in just a little bit. But, Jason, should we just watch the clip and give our kind of point of view on this?
Yeah, we might as well. It's kind of funny. You know, again, we don't love everything Tucker Carlson has to say, but we sure don't love what Chris Hayes has to say. And what a softball, ridiculous interview that was with AOC to begin with. So, Tucker, take it away.
The end of something. Maybe that's why people get drunk on New Year's Eve, to forget it. It's sad to think that a whole year is over. But if you think New Year's is depressing, how would you feel if you thought that all life on this planet was ending soon? 3 million years of human history erased forever.
Wait, pause it here, because this is important to bring up. Chris Hayes had a long, extensive sit-down interview with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and they pretty much acted like they were besties. Chris Hayes kind of let go of his journalist integrity, and what Tucker Carlson brings up here is an important point of view, because we have heard Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez literally say that the world is ending in a few years, and use very kind of hyperbolic talk, going into some of the mentality, which I do think is detrimental, because, like, just imagine, how would you act? How would you behave if you thought the world was ending erroneously based on no facts at all, Jason?
Yeah, 12 years. We got 12. I mean, forget about senior. I mean, why am I worried about Social Security? I shouldn't be. There's no way it could pay out for me if the Earth ends in 12 years. The ludicrous nature of the conversation between her and Chris Hayes is funny enough, but Tucker goes next level. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's no reality in fear mongering. Let's play this video.
Chris Hayes thinks so. Chris Hayes is what every man would be if feminists ever achieved absolute power in this country. Apologetic, bespectacled, and deeply, deeply concerned about global warming and the patriarchal systems that cause it. On Friday, Hayes hosted a town hall event on MSNBC with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It was designed to promote her Green New Deal. This apparently seemed like a wise idea to executives over at NBC. The very same news outlet that spent 2 years lying to you about Russia brings you a 29-year-old former bartender to teach you about science. Hayes
wait, Jason, pause it here. I do believe that was a little bit of a stretch there. That was definitely a gut punch. That was definitely a very, very tough statement by Tucker Carlson. It is kind of stretching it to say if feminists ruled the world, it would be like Chris Hayes. What's your take on it? Because that was an aggressive one out there.
I mean, I don't know how I could argue with him because it's a hypothetical, and feminists don't and will never rule the world as. Listen, if we're talking about regular feminism,
you don't know, maybe.
No, definitely not. I mean, again, in almost half of the world's population, over 1 billion Muslims plus. I mean, just look at them. You already have women that have to wear hijabs that are under Sharia law. They got a long way to go to get to just regular feminism. Well, listen, I'm for equal rights. I'm for equal pay. I know a man and a woman for most jobs that don't include any kind of physical strength can do them equally as well. I'm not trying to be, a pig, but at the same time, I'm certainly not going to blame the quote-unquote patriarchal system for global warming. I mean, that's absolutely and utterly ridiculous. So, let's continue with the Tuck because he makes another few good points. And I'm sorry, I can't agree with Vogue. I don't think I could swipe right on Chris.
We'll get into that later.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later.
Terms at the outset of the show. Unless you do exactly what Dr. Ocasio-Cortez says, the entire human race has only 12 years to live.
What we have to do to avoid the most catastrophic effects of climate change is to cut emissions in half in 12 years. 12 years. That's the project we've been tasked with by the Earth. Has come a bold new policy proposal that might be the most controversial thing in American politics at the moment. You've probably heard about it. It's called the Green New Deal. Some people call it a socialist monster. Some people call it our only hope for survival here in the way of life that we.
Well, when you say that some people call it our only way of survival for life on these planets, I would say that those are elitist fearmongers that don't believe it, and the puppets that sing and dance to their tune. This is ridiculous. 12 years?
Yeah, they're literally playing into the eugenics population control talking points that we have heard throughout the centuries. And let's admit it, Chris Hayes, he's a little bit effeminate, and sometimes I get confused if I'm watching Rachel Maddow or him. I'll just be honest, and that's not a jab. That's reality. Let's keep it going.
No, side by side, him and Maddow. I mean, they look like.
I get. Yeah.
I mean, they could be first cousins, right? I'm not trying to get non-binary on everybody, but you put those two next to each other, white-collared shirts, glasses, similar haircut, similar build. Just saying. Continue, Chris. Tell us how the world is ending.
I get confused.
We hold dear.
It looks like Ellen. Kind of a fusion show. But did you hear what he said? Our only hope for survival. Holy smokes, that is terrifying. Help us, Chris Hayes. Where's this life raft, this humanity-saving antidote that alone can prevent the death of our children? Well, the good news is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has the cure for human extinction. All we have to do is obey her and be very, very good people.
In my framework and my belief that we not just have a wealthy society, but that we have a moral society.
Let me stop it there. A moral society. I think that we try to have a moral society. I think all societies think that they're somewhat moral. In the United States, with checks and balances, with constitutional rights, I think that on the surface, we try to have a moral society. But at the same time, other institutions get so out of control, we have our very corrupt pay-for-play privatized prison system. Is that moral?
Yeah, well, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I get where you're coming from, but who's going to decide this morality? It's hard for me to believe that any state, government, business, or religious entity is going to be able to bring an entire society into quote-unquote morality when we all have different ideas of what that is, Luke.
Well, Jason, a lot of the despots, a lot of the dictators, a lot of the horrible rulers throughout history thought that they were doing the right moral thing. But, this is the main kind of idea that I wanted to build on top of yours. Because, again, when people do something, whether it's Stalin, Mao Zedong, and Hitler, they thought they were doing the right thing. They thought they were helping the environment. They thought they were helping, their people. Again, this is the main problem here in the thinking of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Look at her language. Me, mine, ultimately saying, what I'm getting from it all, I am big daddy government, I'm going to tell you what to do, and that ideology has led to tremendous human suffering whenever special elites take power over you and decide your life. Let's keep playing these clips.
Wait a second, you may be wondering. How does a member of Congress who hasn't yet turned 30, someone who's never even raised children, get the right to lecture me about morality? Well, that's the difference between you and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is a highly decent person. Listen to her explain how she doesn't resort to ad hominem attacks, unlike her enemies, who, by the way, are xenophobic white supremacists.
We're actually talking about something substantive. We're not calling anyone names. People say Tea Party of the left, and I find this phrase very interesting, this phrasing very interesting, because the grounding of the Tea Party was xenophobia, the underpinnings of white supremacy.
I need to stop that there, because I want to throw up.
Bull crap.
Just so everybody knows, this is not debatable, by the way, okay? Anybody can do a Google search on the original Tea Party, and it was born out of 9/11 Truth, and it moved into Ron Paul. I was in San Francisco.
It was Ron Paul. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I was in San Francisco, and you can look this up. Just type Jason Burmis, 9/11 Truth, San Francisco, where people dressed up, and this is before the modern Tea Party. This is where it was taken from, where people dressed up in colonial outfits, had a giant 9/11 commission report, larger than a person, with holes embedded in it, and then they tossed it into the bay.
The Boston Harbor.
They tossed it into the bay as a protest. That was the original Tea Party. Now, as that moved on to Ron Paul, because many people who were into 9/11 truth, who were into libertarianism, constitutionalism, independent freedoms, got behind him. They started talking about the Tea Party, and they tried to smear Paul as a white supremacist. They did everything they could. That's often forgot about, but when he ran for president in 2008, that was the big talking point. And all those heroes that Tomorrow's News Today promotes, the Sean Hannitys of the world, they were the first to do it. Okay? So this is not about right and left. And this, I'm sorry, she has no idea what she's talking about here. It kind of makes me want to throw up. And to even say that the movement got to white supremacy and xenophobia is absolutely ridiculous, Luke.
Well, Jason, you bring up an important point, because it wasn't left or right. It was anti-government, anti-establishment. It had a V for Vendetta kind of vibe to it, and automatically it kind of transitioned into Ron Paul. And then from Ron Paul, this larger anti-government, anti-tax system was pretty much seen as like an Occupy Wall Street movement, but then it was co-opted by people like Sarah Palin and Glenn Beck that pretty much made it just the epitome of right-wing kind of boomer politics, and it was co-opted into a right-wing mainstream media thing, and when it hit mainstream media, it automatically just started to fizzle out, because again, all of the real grassroots energy that was behind it left, because it wasn't what it started out to be. So she's definitely incorrect on so many levels, because it was mainline kind of thinking that fizzled out because of that mainline ideology being pushed on it. Let's keep playing it.
Yeah, stop with the name calling, you racist, white supremacist xenophobe. So it's official. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a moron and nasty and more self-righteous than any televangelist who ever preached a sermon on cable access. She's not impressive. She's awful. So how does she get so famous? Why do people like her? Well, if we're being honest, we got to say it's because not everything she says is wrong. Listen to this clip. It's from the same town hall. Ocasio-Cortez takes a break from her idiotic climate theology to offer what turns out to be a fairly insightful critique of the American economy.
We have runaway income inequality. We are at one of our most unequal points, economically speaking, in American history. We are dealing with a crisis of how our economy is even made up. Our economy is increasingly financialized, which means we are making profits off of interest, off of leasing your phone, off of doing all of these things, but we aren't producing and we aren't innovating in the way that we need to as an economy.
Let me stop it there. I think that he's right. Like she does make good points. We've talked about this before. Her talking about corporatism and big pharma. She's talked about some real things. I think that was pretty legitimate. It was a little oversimplified. Let's see what the Tuck has to say.
Okay, you hate to admit it, given the source, but try to ignore the way she said it. Maybe just print it out and read it. A lot of it's basically true. Neither party wants to talk about this. The Republicans are in fetal position. They just don't want to be unpopular anymore. They'll do anything not to be unpopular. The Democrats want what they've always wanted, total and complete control over you and this country. Neither party will say that our economy, at its core, is badly distorted. Any economy based on interest payments isn't really an economy. It's a scam.
Let me just stop it right there. You notice how all the headlines, Luke, revolved around Chris Hayes and Tucker Carlson going after him for being basically effeminate, right? This is the bigger point. This should be the headline. Tucker Carlson agrees with Ocasio-Cortez on the economy. But they don't want to point that out, because when he's pointing it out, he's not saying it's a right-wing issue. He's not saying it's a left-wing issue. He says it's a real issue that neither party will tackle. And this is one of the reasons that I can kind of get behind Tucker lately, because no other person in corporate media is talking about this stuff.
Yeah, but it doesn't have any drama, so people don't want to pay attention to it. Let's keep playing the clip here.
You got it.
Healthy countries innovate. They make things. They don't treat people like interchangeable widgets. They don't worship finance. In a healthy country, bankers aren't heroes. Private equity is not the highest paid profession. Nobody brags about working at a hedge fund. In America right now, we have the opposite, unfortunately. And that's why Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has a constituency. Not because she's impressive, she's not, but because she's one of the very few people who will say the obvious about growing corporate tyranny in this country. Doesn't mean she's right about anything else. taking power from the banks and giving it to Ocasio-Cortez, as she proposes, would not solve our problems. It'll just put an even dumber person in charge. But she's right about the financialization part. Miki Kantz is a former Bernie Sanders surrogate.
Well, there it is. So, again, I think he ended strong there. I think that it would be hard to argue with his position. And I'm glad that he can go beyond left and right politics to take on what he called corporate tyranny.
He's not wrong, because, you know, right-wing politics usually criticize government, left-wing politics usually criticizes corporations. So it's good to see Tucker, because he's the most willing to make that jump against party lines. He criticized Donald Trump for being pro-war and bombing Syria before. So him crossing the lines of this political ideology dichotomy that people have set is something that I like to see, and it's encouraging. But let's be honest here. In this video, he was more insulting than he usually is intellectually. Like, you could defeat someone intellectually, or you could kind of defeat someone by being insulting. He was a little bit of insulting there, which I think a lot of people prefer the more intellectual side. At least I do, speaking from my own personal experiences here. But again, everything here is PR. Everything here is drama. Tucker Carlson knows what he's doing. He's specifically making hard jabs and punches that are insulting to get a reaction, to get people talking, to get the ratings going. There's a reason he's one of the most popular shows out there. There's a reason he sent Brian Stetler of CNN a box of donuts and called him a eunuch. Jason, Google what eunuch is, because everyone was like, what's a eunuch? What's going on? I didn't know what the term meant until I started looking into it. But go into the official definition, if you can, into Google and type in eunuch, because this is what Tucker Carlson has been calling Brian Stetler, the CNN anchor, for a very long time. Now, again, some of the mainstream media responses are actually comical here, because Vogue, for one specific instance, let me know when you're ready, Jason. Just cut me off anytime.
I mean, it's up. I mean, anybody that watches Game of Thrones knows what a eunuch is. Everybody knows it.
Well, can you tell us what it is?
Well, I mean, it's when your jungola is no longer with you, unfortunately. It's the term for castration. So once you've been castrated and you've no longer got your Johnny Nonsense down there, you are, in fact, a eunuch if you are a male.
Yeah. Again, kind of blurring the lines between intellectual and insulting. Interesting, but this is one of the reasons why I kind of watch Tucker Carlson. I'll just be completely honest here. But let's get into some of the responses here. Vogue says we would swipe right on Chris Hayes. Well, that's a very nuanced point, and I don't believe it to be true. As a single man, knowing the situation out there, that's not what happens in nightclubs. That's not what happens in most. He's not the type of guy to be the one to approach. And most likely, if they are swiping right, they're probably linking Chris to a PayPal link or a Cash App, being like, "Pay me for feet pics," which. You have no idea the level of absolute insanity that's happening out in their field. But Chris Hayes, again, he's not the kind of big, huge, tough alpha man or that kind of attitude that people would find attractive physically. Same with Tucker Carlson. The man wore a bow tie for a few years. Let's just be honest. And same with me. I'm not the big huge alpha man as well. So again, it's interesting that this talk is surrounding about sexuality and feminism. Obviously, it was an insulting jab. It's a way to get attention. But to me, the bigger, meaningful discussions are the bigger points that you brought up in your kind of analysis here, Jason.
Well, folks, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I would not swipe right on Chris Hayes, and you don't have to swipe right on us. What we do need you to do is hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell over at Pulse Change and We Are Change. We're pumping out 4 videos a day. Remember, without your support, this just isn't possible, so please share this stuff on social media, but most importantly, get out there and be the change you want to see in the world.